Hey, how's it going?
Okay, it's going well. How are you doing?
How's your week been? Considering we
Busy.
pushed this 3 days, yeah, pretty busy.
Yeah, it's been one of those weeks. What about you?
Yeah, same. I mean, we're lots of interesting stuff going on. So, and I've like been pushing this off for a couple days, which is good and bad.
Yeah.
And as you can see from my eyes, many sleepless nights with the kids this week. Someone
Well,
needs to give
too.
me an eye product to help solve this problem.
I actually have one for you.
You
One of
do?
our
It's so,
clients
I
recommended
do.
it, like a biohacker.
Well, tell
I
us what it
won't
is
say
so that if
names.
anyone else has any ideas, they can tell us if there's a better product in the comments.
I'd have to look it up, but
Okay.
I'm gonna pull up the name. I'm gonna pull up the name. You can get it on Amazon. This is
I
our
need
first
it.
advertisement. I haven't tried it, so I'm not endorsing it.
Look how great
It's
your eyes
called.
look. But you don't have kids, so
I don't have kids. No,
you you
I'm not
haven't
getting.
you haven't tested the limits of human potential yet.
I don't intend to ever. Yeah,
Sleep.
yeah. Grace and Stella under eye mask combo pack. They have like, yeah, all these different types.
Oh yeah, I know that one. Actually, I've used it.
We're gonna try them out.
Yeah. So the last 2 weeks have been really rough. Like obviously, my 1-year-old was really sick. Was in the hospital for a night. He's totally fine now. But like, just it's really starting to build up on my body, as you can see, and I'm starting to notice it now. Like I'm on the other end of the sleep of the really bad sleepless nights, and it's all starting to compound. So, anyways,
Yeah.
let's jump into it.
Yeah. Well, there
My
was
name's
one thing
Marcha.
I also wanted to like I read this at the start of the week, and I think it's a good segue into our conversation before we even do our intros, but
Yeah.
like I've been carrying this around and it is something I read about just the buyers that we're selling into. So we are selling a category that buyers inherently mistrust,
Yes, I agree.
right?
I mean,
And I
we
was
hear
like,
that feedback all the time. Mainly mistrust because of the vendors.
totally, exactly. So
Yeah.
I read this and I was like, oh my God. Like, I think I just had some like rose colored glasses. Like, I was kind of head in the sand. And we do hear from prospects all the time, like, oh, I've been burned by a dev shop, branding studio, agency, or like they hired a friend of the family to do it and got burned. And like,
Hmm.
so that just kind of hit me. That's why I wanted to open up this conversation with it because we are selling like into an industry where there's not trust anymore. Like,
Yeah.
so that is a good segue to the episode.
Perfect. Well, my name is Marcello. I am one of the co-founders of Tennis. We're a B2B UX design company for mainly for websites and products.
Yeah. Simon Oliver, design director at Tennis. Like Marcello said, we're a B2B web and product agency. Yeah. And what are we talking about today, Marcello?
Just like selecting the right website design and development agency. How do you actually do it? What to look out for? Being on the other end as in the sort of agency side, I feel like it's a very complicated process, partly because, the technology literacy, there's a mismatch. The agencies have a lot of power when it comes to presenting themselves as the tech expert and maybe burying or hiding some parts of their process. Whereas on the marketing side, I think there's a little bit of a disadvantage in terms of like the technology literacy and maybe even sometimes the vendor experience history. And so, yeah, we're just trying to create another little guide here that's hopefully helpful on selecting the right agency, what to look out for. We actually have a previous episode where we kind of did a bit of a deep dive, and we will post it somewhere here, the link. Hopefully, we can figure out how to edit that in. And I think the title was How to Plan a Website.
Yeah. It was
Anyways,
how
we'll
to
we'll
write
put
a
the right link.
UX
Yeah, we'll
brief.
put
We'll get
the
the
right link.
title in there.
Basically, the entire conversation was about coming to the table with a brief or a scope of work or a basic level of planning, which would actually help organizations to source this work a lot. So it's very helpful to kind of come to the table understanding what the website goals are. So just some basic stuff. What are the goals? Like, what are your key metrics? What are your KPIs? Why are you doing this? Is it a brand exercise? Is it an ROI exercise? Is it a revenue exercise? And then just clarifying the basic level of must-have features, booking systems, custom integrations, product catalogs. What does the CMS need to do? I would even say cataloging, what's not working for you and what are the major pain points would be a great value add to bring to the table. We see a lot of RFPs. We don't often respond to RFPs because that's a whole other conversation. But I actually have noticed that in RFPs are pretty much always missing the pain points. They very seldomly list what are the changes organizations are trying to make. And then they also very seldomly define the goals beyond we need a new web experience. They're very rarely tied back to what are the business goals or objectives with this web project that you're working on. And there's very seldomly a catalog of what's working and what's not working. And again, we should probably do a conversation on RFPs because we have a lot to say about RFPs. You can't answer those questions often. You can't have that meeting. But when we have just like actual discussions outside of the RFP and people have an opportunity, a lot of it sits in their head. And part of the kind of scoping exercise we need to do with clients is to unpack all of that. But at least in that context, like we're getting that information, but it does require a lot of pulling, and there's not a lot of like actual documentation or catalog.
For
And then the last part is just budget, like and realistic timelines. And I would say that if you don't have a realistic timeline, create one. Like, what's the goal? It's kind of challenging to approach there's no urgency on this. And then if you don't have a budget, just create a range. Like at least get a starting point for vendors to understand, like to respond basically. And so that's the first part is just, what does a good brief look like that you can, the reason why this is important is so you can compare apples to apples across multiple vendors.
Yeah. And what have we even been hearing from some clients? Their use of AI was pretty interesting. I was shocked to hear that the vendors that they were comparing, they were not apples to apples. So their only recourse was actually to just drop all of the proposals into ChatGPT and be like, what's the difference between these proposals? And I think that as a vendor, you have to expect that prospects are going to be doing that for two reasons. The first reason is jargon. Like our industry is just riddled with jargon. Sometimes it's unescapable, and that's unfortunate. It is just the reality. There's really only one way to say specific words and terminology because it is a technical domain to some extent. And then the second reason is that yeah, you ask for 3 vendor proposals, and no matter how rigid of a structure you ask them to submit in, there's going to be variance in scope of work and terminology, pricing. So, yeah, like you mentioned earlier, the literacy just isn't quite there, and we shouldn't even expect our ICPs, like marketers, executive directors, comms people, to have that technical literacy to unpack the jargon. So they're going to drop it into ChatGPT. That's the reality.
Yeah.
But yeah, so in terms of like what to look for in a website design and development agency, I think the first thing for me is process. And as you know, like we've been shaping our process for the last decade. Every quarter we augment it, update it, try to really refine it into something that's better for us and better for our clients as well. Our process is one of our selling points, essentially. You see it in our decks. We've got it in our value proposition. It's one of the core things that we use to address the problems. So when a company doesn't have a process that's going to de-risk the investment that you're making, that's a huge red flag for us. It's like what I was saying earlier about how we're a category where buyers inherently mistrust. Like I think the antidote to that is that we're selling development and design as risk reduction. That's what a process does. So if a vendor doesn't have that, isn't documenting it, or is vague about it, that's just one flag of many you might want to be tracking. Plus, like in an age of AI, like discovery and documentation is becoming the most critical capital for all of these projects. Good documentation means that you're going to have things to drop into AI as a client and actually help support future initiatives or just establishing context for other stakeholders on the project. So yeah, we're process is big. Technology expertise is another standout thing. So having an agency that focuses in one area of tech is a flag, at least from our perspective. We're technology and style agnostic. We can build in practically anything. Obviously, there's some obscure stuff that we're just not going to touch, but when it comes to technology expertise, you don't want to go like too far down that knife's edge of expertise. You want to find someone who has branched out a little bit and they understand different technology, different platforms, and they understand what's going to fit for you. And the reason for this is because a vendor might be selling you technology because that's all they know how to use. It's not necessarily them making a strategic decision on the best fit for your business, which is a huge problem because you might end up with something on the other side that doesn't work with your business, doesn't work with your integrations, doesn't scale with you. So a vendor who comes in as an expert in one thing is definitely a problem these days.
It's also
It
like
wasn't always, but
straight up compensation. potentially,
Yeah.
depending on what the partnership
No,
is.
that's true. They could just be collecting licensing fees on selling that
Hmm.
tech. So portfolio and case studies, this is always a hard one because like you can't snapshot process. So that tends to be outside of a case study and portfolio. You usually just have that like glossy, like perfect interface snapshots. They're usually static. Maybe there's some motion, but portfolio and case studies are mostly visual. They're not speaking a lot to the process. So with complex development projects, it's good to dig into case studies and ask the vendor to unpack the case study. What were the challenges? What are the technologies used, and how did you actually address the business issues? Sometimes the business issues are qualitative. That's that's the big thing in our industry right now is measuring impact. And I love numbers, but not like it's not measurable all the time. Sometimes the impact is qualitative where the client just feels comfortable in their skin now because the website prior to that didn't match their brand. So there are all these marketing initiatives they weren't even going to touch, right? So looking for variety in a portfolio, I think is good. Red flags would be outdated work. That's definitely a red flag. It means that they're not publishing up to date work, up to date client relationships. Anything to add to that, Marcello?
I mean, I feel like the outdated work thing is not as relevant because uh, there's always a case study that works really well for every scenario, and that case study might not be from something that happened in the last 6 months. It might be from something that happened, a really great piece of work with a competitor, a direct competitor, but it happened 8 months ago, right? Like case studies
I
are,
mean, that's still relevant. I'd say 8 months is still relevant. I'm talking like their last case study was 5 years ago.
yeah, okay, maybe. In it's probably, I would assume that's rare, but also most of the time these things don't have dates on them, so that's true. But yeah, I mean, a portfolio is a snapshot of just like really great work that's been done over however long, right? But I think looking at a portfolio holistically and the entire vendor history is great. But I think what I've seen that rarely, but I think is kind of a really brilliant sort of qualifying question is when companies ask for references within the last 6 months. So like you can look at the whole body of work, but then say like, I want to speak to 3 references within the last 6 months or 12 months or whatever the time frame is. And then you can kind of combine both those things together because yeah, the reality is like everyone's showing all sorts of work from all sorts of time frames. It just depends whether it fits the scenario the problem that you're trying to solve, right?
Mm-hmm.
But combining that with current references and current scores and metrics and things, which is something we're going to talk about as well, I think gives you a good holistic view of like what that organization's like.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the last point about portfolios is, you know, I think for us, we like to have the variety. We're B2B to our core. Like there's nothing that's B2C in our portfolio. But you have a good mix. You have hardware, UX, UI, association, enterprise, LMSs. Like it's a very good broad mix of work. And as you know, like we've lost work in the past because a university chose to go with an agency that only does university websites. And the funny thing is when we look at that portfolio of that vendor, all of the projects look exactly the same. It's literally
Yeah.
cookie cutter. And I can't fault the organization for going with that. Like I said, it's about de-risking your investment. So if de-risking their investment is literally just copy paste like something that a vendor has done for another university, fine, do that. But is it really addressing your specific brand, your specific business problems? Probably not. You're just inheriting a framework that worked for
Yeah.
another university. And just because it's the same domain, higher ed, doesn't mean it's the same problems.
Hmm.
So I think of that as a bit of a trap. And it's always it's a gripe I have. Like I would sooner go with a generalist because I know that they're going to bring broader perspectives, more innovative thinking, and a little bit more personalized thinking to a project versus those cookie cutter agencies out there that are like, we only do higher ed websites and we
Yeah.
only do it in this way. It's like,
There's
cool,
just
just
something about
have
human
fun.
nature and belonging that's tapping into, right? Like there's something about the fact that you've worked with competitors in my industry, especially if they're successful competitors, that makes me want to work with you. I mean, like everything that we've read in every business book and every consultant is like, specialize, focus in on an industry because that's the most powerful way that you're going to kind of grow in the early stages. So I feel the same way. I'm like, I get it, but the reality is also that diversity is good too. So it's like you're balancing like the human nature with like practical reality.
Yeah. I think there's obviously benefits to niching, and there's a good book I can share with you after just about like how your unique value proposition needs to be more niched, and like
Mhm,
it's a conversation we have often, but there's like niche and then hyper niche. And I think like hyper niche opens up the vendor for some risk, but definitely some like some growth. But I think we're more just niched in B2B, at least for the time being.
mhm,
Awesome. Yeah. So the last couple points I have here for the what to look for is the design and development process, which is a nod to my comment earlier about having a process at all. Definitely get vendors to dig into what does the design process look like? What does the discovery process look like? How do they manage a project? What's the philosophy of client service? All of these things are important, like value based things to running a project effectively and delivering successfully as well. We see that a lot of technical vendors, they just take the work after handoff, disappear for weeks or months, and then come back and they're like, so we finished the thing, and you go through it for QA and it's riddled with issues, right? Whereas like our development process is a bit different. It's we show you work in progress early on. Like even if it's scrappy, it's a proof of concept very, very early on so that you get to see progress. And then from there, it's progressive and you can see the scrappy version, the alpha, up to the beta, up to final launch, right? There's no disappear for months on end, come back with a thing that you say is finished. So
right.
having a good development process that's transparent, I think is really critical for a vendor. And that vendor has to be comfortable showing work in progress. Not a lot of them are because they're afraid that the rough around the edges is going to scare clients off. But what we've seen is that clients like to see that because it shows progress, shows transparency, and they like to see a product taking shape as well. And yeah, culture fit. I mean, how does the agency actually fit within your culture? Do they align with your values? Do they fit your corporate culture, your corporate structure?
If people are actually like, they do like a review and analysis of culture and values and compare them to their own
They
in their
probably
process.
don't. No, no.
I bet some do. I mean, the thing is like companies with really good cultures tend to do that culture work
Yeah.
because they're managing it so aggressively throughout the business. They obviously they don't want to bring on vendors that are going to affect the culture in any way. So I think that like companies with great cultures continue to do that, but there's not many businesses like that, anyways.
No. And if they do it, I haven't actually seen it. Like even our enterprise clients, it's just a
Yeah,
natural fit. I don't know if behind the scenes they're looking at our value slides and being like, ah, yes, tennis is aligned. It's
I
like
mean we've
all of
talked
that
about doing that,
alignment
and
actually just
we're
came from all of the meetings that we've had with them. So it was way more personal. They just
we've
know what
we've
it's like
literally
working
talked
with
about
us.
doing that as a tiny business. So I'm sure that behind the scenes there's larger businesses that are like have like some sort of scorecard or mechanism to be like, do we want to work with these guys or not?
Oh, I bet.
Outside of like the technical thing. All right, we got like
Yeah.
5-6 minutes left. Let's just
Nice.
talk
Well, the
about
last point I actually wanted to cover was support philosophy. So in that pitch, if they don't have a plan for after launch, that's a significant flag as well. Because as we know, websites are products, they're ongoing. There's continuous monitoring, continuous upkeep, and that's part of a strategy. If that's not in the process or even part of the conversation, then it's an issue because it means that
funny
no one has a
enough.
plan for what happens after the thing launches.
Yeah, I also think this is one of the biggest red flags. So it really depends on like what the support model is and how much value, what the support model is in terms of like the agreement and how you're being locked in, how billing works, and also what kind of support is sort of default to the services. If it's not providing value, then that's a red flag. If like billing is based on hourly effort and not on a flat rate, monthly rate, and the contract terms are too long, 3 years, 2 years even, say that's also a red flag. I think the number one complaint is like people being locked in for stuff that they shouldn't be. It's like the number one complaint we hear and why there's a lot of distrust. And I think it's like following a very old model of web that has existed for a really long time. which was basically, like, we will create this for you, but you can't do anything with it without us over the long term. So if like a support model is at all reminiscent to that sort of philosophy, then it's like a huge red flag.
Yeah, for sure. So what questions should people be asking before hiring?
So, going through the vendor process, there's some questions that we think would be good to ask. We've kind of discussed a lot of them throughout the process. Things around process, asking about the process. Typically, what we see is the very first step is just submitting a proposal or a document. Second step in that process is bringing clients in for a presentation, or bringing vendors in for a presentation. But structuring that presentation around asking some strategic questions. The first one, I think that would be really valuable for a lot of clients that are sourcing web and UX work, is to ask to walk through a case study so that you actually see a process in action versus what you see in a document. So just straight up ask to pick the most relevant case study based on a set of criteria that you have, and ask the vendors that are participating to walk through a case study. I would also ask if vendors are official partners of any of the technology that they're recommending. That kind of helps to give a little bit of context in terms of the tech and the development process that they're recommending. Asking if they have in-house development is important, and if it's not in-house, that's not necessarily a red flag, but understanding who and how they work with external partners is important. And then in terms of the ongoing support, I think just asking more questions to understand, like, how does that work tactically? Like, how do you actually support? What are typical challenges that you are actually helping solve through your support contracts? Getting a list of those will really help to help you to understand, like, what type of support a vendor is actually.
Yeah, is it like value driven support, or is it just plugging holes,
Yeah, if they
like
respond and
technical
say,
holes, right?
like, we help our clients to update content, huge red flag. Big one too. How do you measure success? How are we going to be successful together?
Yeah, that's a great one. Do you have any like anything that you've heard from clients, like measurements of success?
I mean, like, the clients that come to the table with KPIs they're trying to measure are conversions, revenue, depending on the project, savings, cost savings. Like, all of these things are pretty big metrics. I'd say like cost savings is a really easy one, because usually tied to all of the challenges that clients have with managing platforms or products. So usually they have that data, they just haven't documented it anywhere, and it's really easy to influence that data through a good design process, basically.
Yeah, no, absolutely. One thing I wanted to add to your point about licensing and the technology is there's some agencies out there that actually own the CMS that they're selling you.
Yeah, good point.
And
Yes.
that is like, I think we said in our CMS series, if that's the case, just run as fast as you can because it's like, that's not even, that's a flag. That's a disaster just waiting to happen.
Yeah, maybe there's a scenario out there where it makes sense, but I think people
I
just
don't
need to
know.
think that, like, these CMS companies that are available, and there's lots of them, they are they have completely scaled up operations. They're focusing 150 million% on supporting a product. The facts are that if a technology company, you're thinking of using proprietary tech from a design and development agency, how much of their time are they actually supporting the technology? It's not going to be comparable to something like Webflow, WordPress, Sitefinity. The list goes on and on.
Yeah, yeah.
Those are just the facts. Unless they are actually a dedicated CMS company and they're making a really thoughtful attempt at scaling up a competitive CMS product, and even then, it's like in the actual technology needs to be huge to make that leap. It can't be something comparative to any of these other companies, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I think where I would shy away from them entirely is because I don't think intent is aligned. We do a lot of our
Uh-huh.
work on trying to fit technology to business challenges. A company that owns the CMS, they're selling one thing. They're selling their CMS. I don't think that they have your best interests in mind. Maybe it's a perfect fit. Maybe it's not a square peg in a round hole kind of thing. But oftentimes we've seen it, it just doesn't work because
Hmm.
they're selling a product to you based off of their product. That's in their best interest is to sell it to anyone, to
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah.
Their best interest isn't to come in and make sure that that project or the product addresses your business needs directly. And that's why you go with an agency that's more of a generalist, that's technology agnostic, because they have a lot more like variety to select from to address your business needs. So I think we're out of time.
Yeah.
Do you wanna close us out with a quick recap? Any
Yeah.
takeaways?
So as a recap, when you're looking for a website design and development agency, there are a lot of potential pitfalls. So we're trying to kind of structure an approach that'll help organizations to do that work. Come to the table with a brief that has at least an attempt at starting to define goals, clarifying features, clarifying challenges, budget ranges, timelines, and then start to look at some key pieces of the proposals, things like process. What is the organization's process? What is their technology expertise? Are they leading with a technology, or are they agnostic and recommending a technology based on your use case? Looking at things like portfolios, highly emphasize testimonials and references, because I feel like that is one of the like objective measures to quality and experience. And the more a company or a vendor has available in different channels, the better. If it's very limited, or they're only offering you references and very, I don't know, fine scope of work examples, that's probably a red flag. And then lastly, just cultural fit. Like, how does the organization compare and fit in with the culture and values of your organization? Because obviously, like, you want to work with people that you like working with. That's it. And
Nice.
hopefully it was helpful. And we've got a lot of more content on the channel in the same sort of scope of this. So if you're learning and you're trying to build better products, better websites, subscribe. Thanks.
Awesome. All right. Thanks for chilling. Take it easy.
Okay. Bye.